Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the Record Rangers podcast, brought to you by NordVPN, the best place to get premium cyber security, all for the price of a cup of coffee per month. My name's Scott McDermott. I'm joined as ever by my Daily Record colleague, Andy Newport. Andy, it's end of the season, but no, the work never stops, and we were privileged at the start of this week to sit down and have a chat with Rangers chairman Andrew Cavenagh, new chief exec Jim Gillespie, along with other journalists, of course. I just want to ask you, I mean, we'll get into the specifics of what Cavenagh and Gillespie talked about, but just in general, given the season it's been, hugely disappointing campaign for Rangers' point of view. Danny Rohl, the manager, under serious pressure. Given all of that, what did you make just in general of what Andrew Cavenagh said the other day?
Yeah, I think he's a convincing character. I mean, I've always felt that. I mean, even going back 12 months ago when we had a couple of conversations with him round about the takeover, the sort of AGM that took place, or the EGM. Since been sort of, as you say, lucky enough to have a couple of conversations with him around Ibrox and a couple of meetings with him, and I always find him as a guy who's comes across as sincere and earnest and determined to do what's best for Rangers. I don't get any inclination this is a guy that's in here to for nefarious means. He's here to make a quick buck in this. I think we've seen over the last few years that Rangers aren't a money-making enterprise. So if you're looking to get rich quick, Rangers probably isn't the place to do it. So I think he's in here for the right reasons. But then you come back to what's happened, and the fact is that yet again he's had to sit down with us at the weekend and admit to mistakes being made and vowing to learn from it. And Will, I think he said all the right things on a number of really important subjects. The fact is, I think Rangers fans will be looking, going, well, where's the result of that? And until they see what effectively what Rangers will always be judged on as a winning football team, until they see that, then I think there will be question marks. I think he's, as I say, his heart's in the right place. But really, I mean, you've got to say that as a first year in charge, it probably couldn't have gone worse. 50 million spent to get what, at best, well, Rangers are now sitting here, was it on Wednesday afternoon, praying that Dunfermline of all clubs don't win the Scottish Cup, because if they do, that would send them careering into the Conference League, deny them a Europa League spot. So, yeah, I remember sitting here last year talking about the Americans, talking about Russell Martin. He got appointed and saying, listen, Rangers fans could perhaps get their head around another sort of trophyless season if they saw some serious signs of progress. If anything, they've seen signs of regression at various points this season, and I think that's the concern. So, he's obviously backed Danny Rohl at the weekend. He's insisted he's the man that's going to lead them to titles. I still think that's the right decision, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But I think both the manager and the chairman and the board are under some serious heading into the new season, and they have to get off to a flyer. Otherwise, you might just see some similar scenes to what we saw early on last year.
I mean, you're right too. The big kind of headline points he made, Cavenagh. He kind of made two vows, if you like. One of them was that he won't rest up until Rangers are winning again, until they're the best team in Scotland again. And crucially, the other vow he made was to stick by Danny Rohl when he's obviously under severe pressure for the fan base. We've already seen criticism, we've seen banners. Some punters already want him out. Do you think he was right? Do you think he's right to back Danny Rohl at this stage? And also, do you get the feeling from him that he won't? The Americans won't go away until they are top dogs in Scotland again. I mean, is that possible?
Just in the second point, yeah. Listen, I do get the sense that they're here for the long haul. As I say, I mean, they've already invested a hell of a lot of money. I mean, if you just look in, I think it was think in order to complete the takeover, they were looking at something in the region of 75 to 80 million pounds. They injected 20 million pounds into the club at the first share issue. They've announced plans for another 16 million pound share issue, and they were saying again that they will continue to invest where necessary. So, listen, I don't see them walking away now when they've put those kind of. I mean, they're rich men, but listen, you don't get rich by throwing away money like that. They will be in this knowing that if they can get themselves into the Champions League, that's where the opportunity is to win your money back. That is the roll of the dice that they're gambling on. In terms of Danny Rohl, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of trolling Danny Rohl in many ways, and I must admit, one of them is that I think he's a genuinely very nice man. I think he's a terrific human being. All my dealings with him in these sort of 7-8 months at the club, I just think he's a decent person. I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I think he's Scottish. I think in football in general, that's a quality that is not always to the forefront. And I think when you do see somebody who's a genuinely nice person, I think you have to credit them for that. But on the more footballing side, I'm sort of split between this. I think if you're going to be a successful Rangers manager, you need to win the big games, and that's where he's come short. His record against the top six, his record against Celtic, his record against Hearts just isn't good enough. But then you go, well, he took over a squad, and you and I and others and supporters would have said this the same, that the Rangers team he took over was as poor as you can remember in living memory. I mean, if you take away the sort of lower league Rangers teams, this is as bad as anything we've seen for a long time. And to really expect them to go and win a title seemed fanciful back then. The problem is that Danny Rohl gets them into position, a striking position, and then they crumble. But then you go, well, and we've spoken about this at length recently, is that any real shock? I mean, they crumbled at the start of the season when the pressure was on. They get themselves into a title race because really the pressure's off them at that point. And then once the pressure's back on, that's when they crumble again. So is it any surprise? Is that Danny Rohl's fault? I'm not so certain. I mean, what's your take on it?
Well, I mean, that segues nicely into another big thing that Cavenagh said, where he echoed Danny Rohl's comments and sentiments about having to get new leaders in at the club, or in at the dressing room. I think we both expect, James Tavernier, the captain, obviously leaving. I think we both expect the leadership group at the club pretty much to be ripped up in the summer with new blood injected into it. And Cavenagh, as I say, reiterated that. I tell you where I've got an issue with that, Andy, and I agree. Listen, I agree with the sentiment in general. I think Rangers are crying out for new leaders within that dressing room, but I'm just struggling to work out how it's took Andrew Cavenagh, other people at the club, even Danny Rohl, why it's taken them so long to realise this. I mean, I feel as if you'd asked a Rangers fan, even if you'd asked any of us as journalists a year ago, or when Danny Rohl arrived at the club, what was needed, I think we'd have said, it needs leaders. It probably needs a new captain. I know I certainly said in the summer, last summer when Russell Martin arrived, I thought his first move should be to go and sign a new captain, and that wasn't me having a pop at James Tavernier. That was me basically saying that after years of failure, if Russell Martin was serious about coming in and changing the culture at Ibrox, and changing the culture in that dressing room, he had to rip it up and start again. It needed a new leadership group, but he didn't do that. He stuck with the same characters. He stuck with James Tavernier, Jack Butland, John Souttar, Nico Raskin, the guys that were already in there, stuck with the same captain. And I think it certainly backfired on Russell Martin, and Danny Rohl kind of paying the price for that coming in October. So I agree with what Cavanagh's saying, but as I say, I just don't understand. It's almost like, when you arrived a year ago, most people could have told you that this was the problem. So it just leaves Rangers playing catch up, if you like, and it's not going to be easy. When you think that they want to go and immediately challenge for a title, if you're going to revamp a squad, completely change a dressing room, put new leaders in, sometimes it can take time. And as you've touched on there, Rangers and Danny Rohl don't have time at the start of next season. I don't know what you think of that.
Definitely don't have time. As I said, I think I said on here last week, you look at the schedule coming up, they're going to have to, in the opening round of fixtures, they're going to have to go to Celtic Park, they're going to have to go to Tynecastle, they're going to have to go to Pittodrie. You add in the European qualifiers, 4 games to get through just to reach the group stages of the Europa League. They're in the position where they really can't afford any slip-ups, or else you're back into this rinse and repeat cycle that we keep talking about.
If you sign leaders, Andy, they need to be pretty much ready to lead.
One of the things that we spoke to Jim Gillespie and Andrew Cavenagh about was, the recruitment, and just the fact this is a World Cup summer. We all know that, effectively, the further down the food chain you are, the sort of more you're reliant upon the clubs, the bigger clubs, getting their business done, because it's only then that the guys in the fringes of these bigger sides that they move down the food chain, and Rangers obviously a good way down that these days. So the World Cup will delay that. Clubs will wait to see who the big figures are in America and Canada and Mexico this summer. So that could slow down business. And so, Rangers, believe that they're going to be going in some sort of training camp, sort of early July. The league starts the first weekend of August. The first qualifiers will be sort of around about the 6th or 7th, I think it is, of August. Rangers need guys in next week, basically. They need a whole. I've just written a piece for the website that sort of goes through just how many players are, there's only 23 players contracted for next season if you take away the likes of Tavernier, Liam Kelly. I think Bailey Rice, his contract's up. 6 loan players are away. And of that, 23, 6 of them are basically guys coming back from loans elsewhere. There's a huge amount of work to be done. We spoke to, let's say, Cavenagh, and he didn't want to use the word rebuild, or I think he preferred to use the word revamp. But for me, they're looking at least 10 in and out this summer, probably more. So they have to get this work done early. But just go back to what you're saying there, like in terms of like what we could have told or what they should have known a year ago. I remember sitting across from Andrew Cavenagh in the press room a year ago after the EGM, the share issue that confirmed the takeover, and he spoke about. I remember asking him, going, "You've seen Ibrox at its worst." I remember those protests that met. I think it was against Dundee United that met the previous board, and he gave us. He insisted he was ready for it, but the protests that have then since followed, I think, have been even angrier and even more, ferocious in their fury. And he kind of said to us at the weekend, I knew it would be difficult, but I just get the sense that even he's been taken aback by some of the froth, the fury that has been flying about this season. But for me, I don't think that should have been the case. I think he should have known, because it was made clear to him that you have to win from day one. And I'm not saying winning trophies. I didn't think they had to win a trophy this season, because as if the first part of a new era, but they had to give the fans something. And that's why I go back to Russell Martin just being like such a wrong pick. It's a guy who effectively didn't really mind if his team lost as long as they played nice football. That is just like the absolute opposite to what Rangers and Celtic are all about. Winning's the number one, and then if you can do it with a wee flourish, then so much the better. But if you come to this club and are happy to go away and draw at Falkirk or lose the odd game at Ibrox, that's just not going to wash. The fans, I think the fans are, in that sense, I think the fans' concerns were right. They had, that for me was a managerial pick by somebody who didn't quite get what they're stepping into. I think he'll get it now, and I think That's why you'll realise that this summer is going to be huge for him, because if they don't get it right, then whatever faith the fans had left in not only Danny Rohl but in the board is pretty much gone.
What about this idea, Andy, this notion that's obviously that's gathering pace now, that Rangers need to sign Scottish? They need to sign Scottish players. I mean, we asked Andrew Cavenagh about it. I asked him specifically about Lawrence Shankland as a potential target, or why he wasn't a target last summer. More to the point. What do you think about this? I mean, again, I know what I sound again like, no, we told you so, Andrew, but I mean, it's kind of, to me, it's kind of obvious. I've said for so long on here and on Hotline Live, Rangers needs a Scottish core. Every successful Rangers team has had that, original Scottish people that they'd signed for the Scottish leagues. You go back through the years, listen, we've listed them so often on here. You go back and talk about your Chris Boyd, Stephen Naismith, Stephen Whittaker, Kevin Thompson, Kurt Broadfoot, Nacho Novo. There's so many of these guys that have come in, and been the real kind of core of successful Rangers teams, and yet that seems to have been lost in the last few years. And Andrew Cavenagh, I was quite surprised actually. I mean, he was adamant the other day that Rangers now have an SPFL bias, he called it. If there's a choice between two similar players and one of them's got SPFL experience or one of them's Scottish, then Rangers would always go for that. I mean, I must admit, I'm not sure if I believe that completely, because to me, there's been examples. I mean, look at January, for instance. Rangers went and signed Ryan Nadiri from the 3rd division in Germany for £5 million. I mean, that's an incredible outlay, for, albeit a young player, but coming for that level. I think you could argue there might have been players like Shankland, for instance, who, I think even for that kind of money, you'd be talking like Claudio Braga, people like that you could maybe go for with SPFL experience. So I'm not sure how much I buy into that, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is, how much do you agree that this summer, I mean, they've already been linked with guys like Luke Graham, Elliot Watt, to name a few. How crucial is it, do you think, that Rangers go and sign Scottish players, whether they're the leaders in the group or no, but they go and sign players with SPFL experience?
Listen, if it's just signing a Scot for the sake of it, then no, that's not what it's about. It has to be, when we say, and a number of us, and I include myself and I include yourself, when we've argued that they should be saying that, it's because of what your archetypal Scottish player will bring, and that will be an understanding in the league, it'll be an understanding of the requirements of the club, and an acceptance that what has gone on through the last few years at Ibrox isn't acceptable. If you were saying you could go and find that in a player elsewhere, then they definitely should be going for that. I think, as much as Andrew Cavenagh is saying that he's got a pro SPFL bias, I'm pretty certain that he'll have a pro cheapest deal possible bias, and that'll be the number one driving forces in recruitment. And it always is. You're looking for the best deal. He was saying, if we've got two players and one of them happens to be Scottish or playing the SPFL, we'll go for that one. Well, no, if that player happens to be playing at Aberdeen, and you know that Aberdeen are going to charge Rangers a premium, because if they don't, their fans will go Tonto. So, that's why these things will need to get wrapped up. But yeah, I agree that, I think in an ideal world, a Rangers team would always contain, some Scottish players, ideally Glaswegians, ideally Rangers fans who will run through brick walls. But if you can find that, and how many, you're not trying to tell me that Nacho Novo, coming from, signed from Dundee, but you're trying to tell me that his commitment levels and understanding of what was required at Rangers were any less than, a Chris Boyd or elsewhere. So what I'm trying to say is, in an ideal world, that might be the thing you'd want, but signing a Scot just because of what his passport says, that's not going to cut it. It's because when we talk about a Scottish identity, it's because of the people that the understanding that these people might have of what is required at Rangers. But listen, I do think that's the way they'll go this season, because I think it's harder and harder now to find at the sort of price point that Rangers can operate and guys with those, characteristics. I think, generally speaking, guys with the ability levels and the mental strength, I think they go for an awful lot more expensive fees. So, I think that's I think it will happen, but I don't think it should be the be all and end all just because they're Scottish.
I'm going to put you in the spot then. I mean, if you could, if Rangers could go and sign 2 players currently in the SPFL within reason this summer, who would be the 2 players that you'd go and get that would improve the team, but also all the stuff we're talking about, leadership, character, etc. Who would you go for?
I mean, I like Watt a lot. I think he's controlled 2 or 3 games against Rangers this season. I think he's a good physique. I mean, he's Scottish qualified, but he's English.
Yeah.
I'm led to believe that his family lean towards Ibrox in terms of their allegiances up here. But he's been about a bit. I think he would. You think it was at St Johnstone last year. Couldn't really get a game for them. If anything, you would think he was too cultured, for better of a use of a word, for a team in a dogfight. I think he was maybe too much of a luxury for St Johnstone at that time. But I think you've seen at Motherwell, this is a boy that is absolutely grasping his moment, and if he does get a move to Rangers this summer, I think he'll fully merit it. I know there's a lot of talk about Elijah Just going to Celtic, but for me, if Rangers aren't all over that, they're missing a trick. I mean, you're talking about Scottish players, and you're talking about guys that get it, and you have this picture in your head of some like big 6'3" snarling monster that wants to go and snap tackles. For me, what Rangers are really like this season is a guile and a cleverness and a deftness in the final third, and I think that is what that lad has provided Motherwell all season. For me, he was up there with Shankland as Player of the Year. It's I sort of swithered between them at various points in the final few weeks of the season. I know the suggestions, all the talk seems to be that Celtic are in from. I know Rangers have been monitoring whether or not that has gone any further than that. But I would think it would be crazy if they aren't seriously considering making a move for him. I just think he's exactly what he's somebody who's completely different to what I see in Scottish football. And what I like about him, for a wee guy, for such a wee sort of, skinny wee guy, he deals with the physicality of Scottish football, so well. I don't think you do that unless you've got a strength of character with it to go with it. And for me, I think those are the 2 guys I'd be certainly targeting.
Sure, the Motherwell fans will be absolutely delighted you've just taken their best 2 players
out their midfield.
And
who's your 2 be then?
Well, I mean, that's not to make, you've mentioned those 2, and that's not to mention Masvinisi or Callum Slattery at Motherwell. And Slattery's an interesting one in terms of, I think he's been as good as, if no better than Watt in the couple of games against Rangers, especially the games at Ibrox. I thought that last game at Ibrox, Slattery was absolutely outstanding. And
I thought for 45 minutes, the game at Fir Park, the 45 minutes that Rangers dominated, I thought he was Motherwell's best player on the pitch. That game
I think he's been terrific. He's just announced he's leaving Motherwell. Just looking at some of his social media posts, it does look as if he's going to head back down south, closer to family and stuff like that. So that's probably one that's gone past him. But I wouldn't have been against Rangers going after him. I was going to ask you whether you thought the Lawrence Shankland ship had sailed. I mean, people on here will know how I feel about Lawrence Shankland. I've been banging on about him for years since he was at Ayr United. Someone that Rangers should have been looking at even back then. 100% they missed the boat last summer in terms of going and getting him on a free. I've said before, I mean, it's inexplicable to me how Lawrence Shankland could have been available last summer, without a club, and Rangers no, I don't know who's made the decision, but no, somewhere in Rangers recruitment team they have decided against making a move for Lawrence Shankland, and in actual fact, then went and spent best part of 15 million quid on Yusuf Sharmiti, Bojan Majovski, and then Ryan Nadiri in January. So, I mean, I still find that difficult to comprehend. However, going with what Andrew Cavenagh says, it makes me think, could Rangers look at him again, Shankland, and maybe test Hearts' resolve? He obviously signed a contract with him last summer, but he's a year older. I don't know what the kind of price point would be to go and try and get Lawrence Shankland. But if you're saying to me, two players in the SPFL that Rangers should be going for, to me, Shankland is definitely one of them. In terms of a second one, listen, I think you're right. I mean, I think Watt and Just, and I've said Maswanise, I mean, certainly one of those boys at Motherwell, the way they've performed this season, not just individually, but as a team, that team that Askow's put, Jens Berta Askow's put together, I think they've shown what they're capable of. And I think if you put them in, you'd like to think if you put them into a better team, a Rangers team, they would flourish even further. So, probably one of those Motherwell guys. I'd be surprised if Rangers aren't in the hunt for at least one of them. And Shankland for me would be the ultimate in terms of what Rangers are looking for. But I don't know. I mean, do you think the Shankland one, is it too late now, or could they revisit it?
No, listen, I think it'd be a costly. It would come at a cost, in the sense that Hearts are less than likely be keen to do business with one of their main rivals for the league next year. But for me, you talk about guys with leadership, with character, with mental strength, mental resilience. I mean, you just go look at that finish it took to put Hearts 2-1 up against Rangers a few weeks back. And how often have we seen Rangers strikers in similar positions that this season? You're picking, you're picking your door, you're picking your exit that the ball's flying out of. And Shankland could not have struck it any sweeter. He knew exactly where he wanted to put that and buried it. And that's not, I guarantee that every Rangers striker in the building could have made that finish in training, but it's when it comes to the crunch moments, that's what pressure does to you. And Lawrence Shankland, I think, all season has shown that he is the man for the big occasion. I don't think Hearts get to where they get to without him, frankly. So, do Rangers go for it? Listen, until Rangers just get the finger out and make an offer for him, I think this is a conversation that will bore everybody. I think it will frustrate Hearts fans, because this is the last thing they want another summer speculation about their captain, and rightly so. But I agree with you, whether it's this summer, last summer, or a couple of years ago when Philippe Clement's team were going for the title, Lawrence Shankland should have at some stage been a Rangers player, given who he plays for, who he grew up supporting, his abilities. For me, probably took a wee bit longer than yourself to come around to it, but hindsight's a great thing. I think if it doesn't happen, Rangers fans and people at Rangers will come to look back on it as a major mistake.
Yeah. Just briefly, Andy, we spoke to Jim Gillespie obviously the other day as well. I think it was his first proper interview as chief exec. Said a lot of things, said a lot of good things, a lot of positive things. It's clear that he wants to try and exert more Rangers influence on the kind of the kind of authorities within the game, SFA, SPFL. That will be his kind of gig. Spoke about VAR. Want to make sure that that's improved, even if that's at a cost to Rangers. They're willing to do that. Just in general, how do you think Jim came across? How do you think he'll do in that role going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he came across well, spoke well, spoke with an authority, spoke with a humility at times as well. I think it's important to say that. I expected that, having I've dealt quite a bit with St Mirren over the last few years, and having dealt with Stephen Robinson his time there, he couldn't have been any more, couldn't have given any loftier praise to the work that Jim Gillespie did in Paisley. I think it's important to say that Rangers have been striving to get to win back their sort of lost influence that they had in other boardrooms and at Hampden, and how they could sway the sort of big decisions that govern how Scottish football goes forward. They've been trying to get that back basically since 2012, and with varying degrees of success or failure, if you want to put it that way, because a lot of the times they just resorted to, I mean, you know, John Bennett, I wrote a piece in the paper today, John Bennett said himself, Statement FC, just releasing these, you know, 200-word barbs, blasting everybody, or blasting referees, blasting Neil Doncaster, blasting the SPFL, and at no point did they ever seem that, and listen, a lot of their complaints were perfectly valid, but it's how they went about sort of trying to corral a group of followers or a group of allies, is probably a better word, to take that argument forward and to change, to make the changes they felt should be needed. And because they were doing it in this sort of grumpy, angry way, I think a lot of people just said, oh, it's sour grapes, they've lost another league title, they're just shouting into the void. I think it's clear from the Americans, they're obviously not that type. They don't come with any of the baggage of the past, frankly. They don't have sort of axe to grind, if you want to put it that way. They've come in with a fresh outlook, and I think, you know, obviously Jim Gillespie's come in, said a lot of sensible things. Rangers should be leading the argument as one of the two biggest clubs in the country. They should be at the forefront of wanting to drive forward Scottish football for the betterment of Scottish football as well as Rangers. But you have to do that in a way that, you know, makes friends and influences people. If you come out shouting, bawling, issuing statements every 5 minutes, people just become deaf to that. I think that was what Rangers' problem's been over the last sort of 10, 15 years. They have to be better at the political side. So it looks like that's certainly what Jim Gillespie, you know, he's worked obviously in the sort of charity sector. He'll have had to work a lot with government, a lot with sort of councils and things like that. With his work at the Kibble, you'll know how bureaucracy works and how to get around it and cut through red tape. And I think that'll be what Rangers are looking to get out of him.
Just to finish up, Andy, I want to get back to the football. We were obviously at the last game of the season at the weekend at Falkirk. Another big win at Falkirk, 5-2 after the 6-3 the last time, goals galore.
What was your line in the intro? What was the line in your intro about your 3 visits to Falkirk this season?
Summed up with 3 visits. Was it anger, adulation, then apathy? I thought that kind of summed it up pretty well.
Because half the crowd spent most of the game just watching events at Celtic Park.
That's what I'm saying. I think I've ever seen Rangers goals go in and get such little reaction. I mean, it was incredible. The first goal, it was like a ripple of applause at the
somebody just knocked in a 2-foot putt at the Masters. It was just it
was bizarre. Then with this obviously instant at the end where Rangers got a penalty, the fans are the loudest singing of the whole game was the fans demanding that Mikey Moore hits the penalty on potentially his last game for the club. And it almost kind of summed it up that Tello Asgard said, well, no, I'm not listening to it. And he said, I'm hitting it. And to be fair, he scored it. If he didn't score, it might have been a different story. But again...
Penalty, the leg off. I mean, it was
just a kind of clap. Look, it was obviously a decent victory for them, scoring 5 goals. Not that it mattered that much. I was just going to say to me, there are a couple of big takeaways from it. One was Shamiti obviously getting a hat-trick. I've rarely seen a better hat-trick, by the way. I mean, I was impressed at the game when I actually watched the goals back. I mean, in terms of a stunning hat-trick, in terms of 3 totally different finishes for a centre-forward, I thought it was really, really impressive.
Just we are there, Scott. The one that impressed me most was his first one. I think that's the chance he's missed so many times this season. You just need to put it in. You just need to put it over the line.
I know.
Find any way in a toe poke. And I thought that tells me he's learnt a wee bit, that he's learning just a bit. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the flashy top corners you saw for his second one. Just get it over the line.
I think you're right, and I suppose what it told us, we probably knew anyway, but I mean, 15 goals for the season for Shamite. He's had his critics, obviously. We've criticised him ourselves at times. But 15 goals for a 21-year-old first season in Scotland is a pretty decent return. So, I mean, I think I said in my match report, it's clear he's going to be a big player for Rangers next season. You asked Danny Rohl about it after the game, and he was adamant that no, he's going nowhere. There's been a bit of interest for back in Portugal, but I think it's vital. Yusuf Shamit is going to be a big player for Rangers, going to be the number 9.
I'm going to ask that, Scott, because I've just written a piece of the website, sort of going through the 23 guys that are contracted for next season, what I kind of feel Rangers should do with them next season to keep them, sell them, first team guy, or they're just to play apart from the bench. And I put for Chimati, I think they should sell him if the price is right, because as much as 15 goals, and I thought he has improved no end, pretty much because he could have been much worse in the first couple of months. But he's starting to look like a proper centre forward. But I still don't think he's the consistent goal scorer that Rangers need.
Yeah,
go with that. I mean, would you? Or do Rangers gamble on him continuing that progression, becoming even better, in the hope that his value might be high now. They might make a profit on the £8 million they spent on him last year, or you wait and go, right, it's next summer, it's a year from now when you're really going to maximise his value, and he's hit 22 and he's played 100 games for Rangers.
I think that's the case. I mean, I'll hold my hands up in terms of I've kind of flipped a bit on Shamiti, because I was very critical, obviously, to start his Rangers career. Certainly when there was talk about bids in January coming in for him, even at that point, if it was the kind of figures being talked about, I would have said cash in on him. But I must admit, looking at him the last few weeks, I actually said this after the Old Firm game that they lost at Celtic Park. I actually felt for him a bit that day, because to me, he looked like one of the few Rangers players on the pitch who could deal with that fixture, deal with the expectation, deal with the occasion more than anything else. And I felt as if he actually lacked people in behind him that could do the same. So I tend to agree with the second point you made there. I think Rangers should keep him. I think he'll be a big player for them next season. I don't think his value, if you're thinking about 8 million, 9 million, I don't think his value is going up so much that they would get a massive bid in the summer. But I think if he goes again next season and was to score 20 goals, for instance, or maybe over 20 goals, and he's progressing and he gets to 22 years of age, might end up
under his belt.
It might end up with international recognition at some point as well. I think the value would go up. So, I think, and certainly listening to Danny Rohl, I think Shamit is going to be a big player for them. I don't see him going anywhere, unless a silly bid comes in, but it's crazy money and they need to...
I think if they can double their money, I think if they get to 20 million sort of territory, I think that's hard for Rangers to turn down.
Of course.
But I still don't, I'm not entirely... I mean, what a highlights reel we've got. I mean, you talk about that goal, you talk about his overhead, you talk about a couple of goals at Celtic Park. There is some proper finishes in there.
Yeah,
so, if you've got a lazy director of football who's only looking at YouTube and the odd stats website, maybe you can tempt them into it. But
just finally, Andy, before we go, the other point I wanted to make was Mikey Moore obviously got a brilliant reception at the weekend in his last game. We were so impressed with him at his press conference pre-Falkirk, and I think that kind of almost, as if we didn't know already, it made our mind up that Rangers really need to do everything in their power to try and get him back next season. 2 points on that. One was, do you expect him to come back? I know I've asked you this before, but just given that everything that happened at the weekend and his comments and stuff, do you think there's a chance he could come back? But also, and I suppose it ties in, I was at the Scotland press conference yesterday. Steve Clark announced his World Cup squad, and Finlay Curtis is in it. Curtis is a wide player at Rangers. similar age to Mikey Moore. You know, he's been away on loan to Kilmarnock, been absolutely outstanding. I think it's five goals in 14 games. Going to the World Cup, he's now a Scotland player. Do you expect Curtis to, when he comes back to Rangers next season, do you expect him to be a main player or at least one of the 3 or 4 wide players? And does that impact in any way whether Rangers should go back and get Mikey Moore? What do you think?
One, I definitely think they should be getting, if there's any chance at all they can get Mikey Moore back from Spurs, I think they should be all over it. And I think they will be. They'll take it as far as they can. Certainly that seemed to be the message from Danny Rohl, who, I don't think we would want to get fans' hopes up unnecessarily. If he thought it was a long shot, I think he would be sort of playing it down, but there was no sort of sense of that in the way he spoke. The way he spoke a few weeks ago when we raised the matter with him then. Even the little, it might have been a throwaway line, it might have just been a sort of blurted out, half-constructed thought in his head, but we asked him, somebody asked him in the press conference what he'd missed most. He obviously spoke about the fans. He'd really missed them, that he'd fallen in love with the club, and the fans were what really made it so special. And he said that I will miss them, even if it's only for a couple of months. Now, I don't know if I'm just reading into that far too much, because we've asked. I think Mickey Moore, he rolls his eyes every time he sees us come into a press conference, because we always ask him about his future and he's fed up answering it. But it just said to me, oh, that's not, if anything, of all the times I've asked him, he always says, I don't know, it's up to other people. For me, that was the biggest indication yet that, it might happen. I mean, he's always said he loves the club here. And, if there was, if say Tottenham felt it was best for him, he'd come back. I still think his number one would be go back to Spurs and attempt to rip it up in the Premier League. But that maybe just made me think, maybe it's not the long shot after all. Maybe there is an opportunity for him to come back. And then your second point was in terms of Finlay Curtis. I think I don't think he's yet ready to be a starting winger for Rangers, but should he get more game time than he saw in the early months of the season under Russell Martin and Danny Rohl? Unquestionably. There's been times when obviously they're persisting with the likes of a Gassama or an Antman when it's just not really happening. He's one of your own. Why are you not throwing him in and trying to get the best out of him? Again, we talk about guys that know the club. I mean, Finlay Curtis has been at Rangers since he was, 9 or 10, something like that. I mean, if he doesn't know what Rangers is all about, then no one will. So, for me, listen, I think he's had I thought Steve Clarke was absolutely right what he said about the bravery that Finlay Curtis showed. I mean, you think about it, he was sort of plucked out the youth team in the summer, given that opportunity to play, and he was getting minutes, and it sort of dried up. And you might have just thought he would think, well, listen, if I just hang around here, there might be an injury, I might get back in. Knowing that you've seen so many young players that have left Old Firm and it's not worked out for them, and then the time they get back after a loan, and it's maybe a loan that's went poorly, their opportunity is gone. So he really had to gamble on going to Kilmarnock, going well, and hoping that there was still a place. So Rangers could go out and sign another couple of right wingers this season, or left wingers, and he's not getting a sniff again. But it's worked out well for him. I think Danny Rohl will definitely be earmarking a slot from in his squad from next season. It's important he kicks on again, but like going to a World Cup, training every day with up against an Andy Robertson or Kieran Tierney or an Aaron Hickey, Nathan Patterson, guys that are playing in the Premier League every week, that'll do him the world of good. It'll tell him what he needs to do more. He's not yet the finished article. He still looks like a young boy, to be frank, doesn't he? I mean, he needs to fill out a bit, needs to put on a bit of muscle, needs to get a few hairs in the chin. This what incredible opportunities for a young man, and like everything, anytime I've only dealt with him a couple of times, I thought really mature for a young man, but clearly knows what he wants, is determined to succeed at Rangers, and this should hopefully see him a long way towards that. Yourself, your views on both?
I agree with you on Mikey Moore. I think Rangers and Danny Rohl do everything in his power to get him back. Unfortunately for us, I think we'll probably be working on that story to the last day of the transfer window till De Zerbi and Spurs decide what to do with him. But I think there's a chance, and I agree on Curtis. I think he has to come back and play, Andy, and I'll tell you why. If Finlay Curtis doesn't come back to Rangers and play, they'd be as well just closing the academy down, because I mean, he is the perfect example. You know, you rear a young player for many years, he comes through the ranks, he gets into the first team setup early, makes an impact. I think you can say Finlay Curtis did that with a goal, big goal in Europe. Big goal at St Mirren as well. Makes an impact. And you then decide, rightly or wrongly, he decides a club, right, no, he should get on loan, get more minutes, more experience. He's done that, not at a lower level, he's done that Premiership level. And
a team under pressure, a team under real pressure as well.
Exactly. Had a huge impact on Kilmarnock and their ability.
Was it 5 or 6 goals he got for them?
5 and 14.
Crucial to keeping Kilmarnock in the league. Absolutely
exactly.
Crucial.
By the way, listen, Neil McCann and Billy Dodge will deserve a lot of credit for that. Not just keep Kelly up, but the development in Curtis. I think he's a boy. I think he is starting to fill out now, and he's just a boy that looks like scoring every game for Kilmarnock. He's got an appetite and a hunger, and I've been calling out for that in this Rangers team for so long. I just love his attitude. No, he's constantly looking to get shots off. His attitude's so positive, always want to go forward.
You compare him to Scott Olsen, who basically refused to take MD on his whole 6 months here. Exactly. You look at Finlay Curtis, who his first thought is to get the ball down, get a touch, get a shot away or a cross away. So
for the club's point of view, the loan has worked out perfectly. No, they will get a better player back for Kilmarnock. So that is, as I say, that is almost like the perfect setup of the development in a young player. So it's now at the stage where he's leaving Kilmarnock, having developed the way he has. He's forced himself into the Scotland squad. He's going to a World Cup, as you say, in amongst the cream of the crop. He has to go back to Rangers and be given an opportunity to play and to go and prove himself for Rangers on a regular basis. Because, as I say, if he doesn't, and you decide, no, he's still not quite at it, or no, we're going to look abroad again and bring in another Scove Olsen or an Antman or whatever, they'd be as well shutting the doors of the academy, because you're not going to get a better example of that, as you say. No, one of their own, coming through the system, Rangers at heart, completely understands the club and the environment he's in, and clearly his ability, at Premiership level, and now, he's hopefully going to prove at international level. So 100% he has to come back and play. Anyway, we've waffled on for far too long already, Andy.
That's fair.
Well, I know we'll get a break for this week. I'm sure we'll be back next week, even though the domestic season, certainly for Rangers, is finished. But no doubt there'll still be plenty to talk about. So you'll probably see us again next week. Thanks again to the sponsors, NordVPN. You'll be able to listen to this episode and others on YouTube, Apple Podcast app and Spotify. So like and review, because that helps us spread the pod far and wide. And of course, you can keep up to date with all the latest news from Rangers at dailyrecord.co.uk and in the paper. Andy, thanks as ever, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.